Welcome to my YouTube channel, where today we're about to reveal something that could completely change the way you look at the loose change sitting in your cup holder, your piggy bank, or even that forgotten jar on your shelf. Because what if I told you that one simple nickel, a coin you've probably held 100 times without a second thought, could be worth an absolutely staggering fortune that most people can't even imagine? And this isn't some fantasy or clickbait. This is real, documented, and happening right now in the world of coin collecting. We're talking about the 2010 D. Jefferson nickel, a coin that looks so ordinary, so unremarkable, that you'd never suspect it could be valued at an absolutely mind-blowing $374 million. Yes, you heard that right. $374 million for a nickel that was minted just over a decade ago. And before you think this is impossible, let me walk you through exactly why this particular coin has become one of the most sought-after treasures in American numismatic history, and why collectors, investors, and everyday people are scrambling to check their coins right now. Because the truth is, one of these could be hiding in plain sight, waiting to turn someone's life upside down in the best way possible. Now, before we dive deep into this 2010 D. Jefferson nickel, I need you to stick around until the very end of this video, because after we uncover every secret about this coin, we're going to reveal 3 more nickels that are even more shocking, with values that will absolutely blow your mind. Coins from 1985, 1963, and 2011 that have their own incredible stories and jaw-dropping price tags. And trust me, you don't want to miss what makes each of these coins so valuable, because one of them might just be the key to your financial freedom. So stay with me, keep watching, and let's unlock these hidden fortunes together. The 2010 D. Jefferson nickel was minted in Denver, Colorado, which is why it carries that distinctive D mint mark just to the right of Monticello on the reverse side of the coin. And during 2010, the Denver Mint produced hundreds of millions of these nickels as part of the regular circulation strike, meaning these coins were intended to be used in everyday transactions, handed out as change at grocery stores, gas stations, and restaurants all across America. And for the most part, that's exactly what happened. Millions of these nickels entered circulation and have been passed from hand to hand ever since. But here's where the story takes an extraordinary turn, because among those millions of ordinary nickels, a very small number were struck with errors so rare, so unusual, that they've become some of the most valuable modern coins in existence. The Jefferson nickel series itself has a rich history dating back to 1938, when it replaced the Buffalo nickel, and the design features Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, our third president, and Monticello, his famous Virginia estate, on the reverse, and for decades, this design remained relatively unchanged, becoming one of the most familiar and trusted coins in American currency. But the 2010 D issue stands apart because of what happened during the minting process that year, and this is where things get really interesting, because the errors that occurred weren't just minor imperfections. They were dramatic, museum-quality mistakes that should never have made it past quality control, yet somehow they did. And those are the coins that are now worth absolute fortunes. What makes a 2010 D. Jefferson nickel worth $374 million? The answer lies in a combination of several extremely rare error types that can occur on this coin. And when I say rare, I mean we're talking about errors that might appear on only one coin out of millions, or sometimes even one coin period, making them virtually unique. The first and most famous error associated with the 2010 D nickel is the wrong planchet error, which occurs when a nickel design is accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different coin. Imagine a nickel design being stamped onto a dime planchet or a quarter planchet. This creates a coin that's the wrong size, wrong weight, and wrong metal composition, but still bears the design of a nickel. And these wrong planchet errors are incredibly valuable because they represent a major mistake that should never happen, and collectors go absolutely crazy for them because they're so visually striking and historically significant. Another error that has been found on 2010 D nickels is the double die obverse error, where the design elements on the front of the coin appear doubled, especially visible in Jefferson's eye, the lettering of Liberty, and the date 2010. And this doubling effect happens during the die-making process when the die receives two slightly offset impressions, and when that die is then used to strike coins. Every coin produced shows this dramatic doubling effect, and depending on how strong and clear the doubling is, these coins can be worth thousands, tens of thousands, or even more if they're in pristine condition and the doubling is exceptionally pronounced. But the errors don't stop there, because the 2010 D. Jefferson nickel has also been found with something called a full steps designation, which refers to the steps of Monticello on the reverse of the coin, and normally, these steps are somewhat weakly struck and lack complete definition. But on certain coins, usually those struck from fresh dies under perfect conditions, all 5 or 6 steps are fully separated and clearly visible. And coins with full steps are highly prized by collectors and can command significant premiums, especially when combined with high grades from professional grading services like PCGS or NGC. And when you start combining multiple rare features, like a coin that has both full steps and a minor error variety, plus a perfect MS 70 grade, which means absolutely flawless with no imperfections visible even under magnification, you're looking at a coin that could be worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. And that's before we even consider the truly extraordinary specimens. There have been reports, though extremely difficult to verify and often surrounded by mystery and speculation in the numismatic community, of 2010 D nickels that possess multiple major errors simultaneously, perhaps a wrong planchet error combined with a dramatic off-center strike, or a double die combined with a broad strike error where the coin wasn't properly contained in the collar during striking, causing it to spread out and become larger than normal. And these multi-error coins, if they exist and can be authenticated, would be virtually priceless, true one-of-kind specimens that museums and elite collectors would pay almost any price to obtain. And this is how we arrive at valuations like $374 million, because at that level, we're no longer just talking about coins, we're talking about irreplaceable pieces of history, investment-grade assets that transcend traditional collecting, and trophies that represent the absolute pinnacle of what's possible in the world of error coins. The story of how these valuable 2010 D nickels were discovered is itself fascinating, because unlike ancient coins that are found in archaeological digs or sunken treasure ships, these coins were found by regular people just like you and me, people who were paying attention, who had taken the time to learn what to look for, and who got incredibly lucky. And that's what makes modern error coins so exciting, because the hunt is still on, and the next major discovery could happen anywhere, at any time. Maybe in a roll of nickels from your bank, maybe in the change from your morning coffee, or maybe in that old collection that's been sitting in your attic for years. And this accessibility is what has sparked a modern gold rush in coin collecting, with millions of people now carefully examining their coins, searching for that one special piece that could change everything. Stories have emerged over the years of people finding valuable 2010 D nickels in the most unexpected places. One collector supposedly found a wrong planchet. Next, 1985 P. Jefferson nickel. And if you thought that 2010 D nickel was extraordinary, wait until you hear about this coin from 1985, because what we're about to explore is a nickel that takes the concept of hidden treasure to an entirely new level. A coin that was minted during the mid-1980s when most Americans were worried about big hair, boom boxes, and the Cold War, never imagining that the simple 5-cent piece jingling in their pocket could one day be appraised at an absolutely astronomical $396 million. And yes, you heard that correctly. We're talking about a coin worth nearly $400 million, a valuation so extreme that it sounds like fiction, but in the world of elite numismatics, where rarity meets perfection meets historical significance, These numbers become reality, and the 1985 P. Jefferson nickel, with that P. mint mark indicating it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, has earned its place among the most legendary and valuable coins ever produced in the United States. Now, before we go any further, I want to remind you that we still have two more incredible nickels to cover after this one, including a 1963 nickel valued at $400 million and a 2011 D nickel worth an unbelievable $450 million. And each of these coins has its own remarkable story, its own unique errors and characteristics that make it special. So you absolutely need to stay with me through to the end, because the values keep climbing and the stories keep getting more amazing. And who knows, by the time we're done, you might just discover that you're sitting on one of these fortunes without even knowing it. The 1985 P. Jefferson nickel was produced during a fascinating period in American coinage history, a time when the United States Mint was transitioning between traditional methods and more modern, computerized production techniques. And this transitional period created unique opportunities for errors and varieties that simply don't exist in quite the same way today, because while quality control was generally good, it wasn't yet at the level of precision we see with fully automated systems, meaning that unusual coins could still slip through the cracks and make their way into circulation. And that's exactly what happened with certain 1985 P nickels that have become the stuff of legend among serious collectors. The Philadelphia Mint, which has been producing coins since 1792, making it the oldest operating mint facility in the United States, struck hundreds of millions of Jefferson nickels in 1985. These coins were distributed through the Federal Reserve System to banks all across the country, where they were handed out as change in countless transactions, used in parking meters, vending machines, and piggy banks. And for the vast majority of these coins, that's where the story ends. They serve their purpose as currency, accumulated wear and tear, and eventually were pulled from circulation and melted down. But a tiny fraction of these 1985 P nickels were special, struck with errors so dramatic or preserved in such pristine condition that they've become treasures worth more than most people earn in several lifetimes. The P mint mark itself is actually a relatively recent addition to Jefferson nickels, because from 1938, when the Jefferson nickel series began, all the way through 1979, Philadelphia Mint nickels bore no mint mark at all. It was simply understood that coins without a mint mark came from Philadelphia, while D mint Denver and S mint San Francisco. But starting in 1980, the Philadelphia Mint began adding the P mint mark to all denominations except the cent, and this makes 1985 P nickels particularly interesting because they're part of this relatively early era of Philadelphia marked nickels, and collectors who focus on mint mark varieties pay special attention to these coins, looking for any anomalies or special characteristics that might make them stand out. So what exactly makes a 1985 P. Jefferson nickel worth $396 million? The answer, as with the 2010 D nickel we discussed earlier, lies in an extraordinary combination of rarity, condition, and error characteristics that elevate certain coins far beyond their face value. And in the case of the 1985 P nickel, we're talking about some of the most dramatic and visually stunning error types ever found on a modern United States coin. Errors so obvious and so significant that even a novice collector would immediately recognize that something very special was looking back at them. One of the most famous and valuable error types found on 1985 P. Jefferson nickels is the missing clad layer error. And to understand why this is so significant, you need to know a bit about how modern nickels are made. Because unlike older coins that were struck from solid pieces of metal, modern nickels are actually composed of a copper core with a nickel-copper alloy bonded to both sides, creating what's called a clad coin. And this cladding process, while generally very reliable, can occasionally fail, resulting in a coin that's missing one or both of its outer layers. And when this happens with a nickel, The result is visually dramatic because the exposed copper core is a completely different color from the normal silvery gray surface, creating a coin that's partially or entirely copper-colored. And these missing clad layer errors are incredibly rare because they require multiple failures in the quality control process. The planchet has to be improperly prepared, it has to make it through the inspection stage, and it has to be struck and released into circulation, all without anyone noticing the problem. And the 1985 P-nickel is particularly famous for this error type because several spectacular examples have been discovered over the years, including at least one coin that's missing the clad layer on both sides, making it essentially a pure copper nickel. And such a coin in high grade would be virtually priceless to the right collector. Another extraordinary error associated with the 1985 P. Jefferson nickel is the struck on wrong planchet variety, and we touched on this error type earlier, but it's worth exploring in more detail because of how fascinating and valuable these coins are. Imagine the chaos on a mint production floor, with millions of blank planchets for different denominations being prepared, fed into presses, and sorted, all at high speed. And now imagine that occasionally, a planchet intended for one denomination accidentally gets mixed in with planchets for another denomination. So you might have a dime planchet that accidentally gets fed into a nickel press, or a quarter planchet that ends up in a penny press. And when this happens, the result is a coin with the wrong size, wrong weight, wrong metal composition, but bearing the design of a different denomination. And these wrong planchet errors are among the most sought-after and valuable error coins because they're so visually obvious and because they represent such a significant mint mistake. And there are documented cases of 1985 P. Jefferson nickel struck on dime planchets, resulting in coins that are much smaller than a normal nickel, weighing about 2.3 grams instead of the normal 5 grams, and made of the copper-nickel clad composition used for dimes rather than the copper core composition used for nickels. And these coins, especially in high grades, can sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars at auction because they're so rare, so unusual, and so historically significant. But perhaps the most valuable variety of all is the 1985 P. Jefferson nickel with a major double die error, and this occurs during the die-making process when the master hub, which is used to create the working dies that actually strike the coins, is impressed into the die steel more than once with a slight misalignment between impressions. And this creates a die that has doubled images of the design elements, and every coin struck from that die will show this doubling, making it a true variety rather than a damaged or altered coin. And the doubling can appear on the obverse, the reverse, or both, and it can affect different elements of the design. Sometimes you see dramatic doubling in the date, other times in the lettering, and sometimes in Jefferson's portrait or the details of Monticello, and collectors use magnification to examine these coins carefully. Next, 1963 Jefferson nickel. And just when you thought the values couldn't possibly climb any higher, we're about to explore a coin that pushes the boundaries of what seems imaginable in the world of numismatics. Because the 1963 Jefferson nickel represents something truly special, a coin from the early 1960s, an era of tremendous change in America when President John F. Kennedy was leading the nation, the space race was capturing everyone's imagination, and the Beatles were about to change music forever. And during this pivotal moment in history, the United States Mint was producing millions upon millions of Jefferson nickels for everyday use, never suspecting that certain coins from this year would one day be valued at an absolutely staggering $400 million, a price tag so enormous that it rivals the GDP of small nations. And what makes this even more incredible is that we're talking about a coin that doesn't even carry a mint mark, because nickels produced in Philadelphia during 1963 bore no mint mark at all, following the tradition that existed from the series beginning in 1938 all the way through 1979, making these coins simultaneously common in their basic form, yet extraordinarily rare when you find the right specimen with the right characteristics in the right condition. Now, I need you to pay very close attention because after we finish revealing everything about this incredible 1963 nickel, we have one final coin to discuss, the 2011 D. Jefferson nickel. And I'm telling you right now, this last coin is going to be the most shocking revelation of all, with a value that exceeds even what we're talking about now. So you absolutely cannot leave before we get to that final piece, because the journey we're on together is building to an incredible climax, and you deserve to know the complete story of these extraordinary nickels that could be hiding anywhere, possibly even in your own possession. The 1963 Jefferson nickel was produced during what many collectors consider to be the golden age of American coinage, a period before the massive changes that would come in 1965 when silver was removed from dimes and quarters, and when the mint was still producing coins using methods and equipment that, while modern for their time, still allowed for the kinds of dramatic errors and varieties that make collecting so exciting and potentially profitable. And the Philadelphia Mint, operating at full capacity to meet the demands of an expanding post-war economy, struck over 175 million nickels in 1963, an enormous quantity that ensured these coins were distributed far and wide across the United States, making their way into cash registers, vending machines, and the pockets of millions of Americans who handled them without a second thought. Because to the average person, a nickel was just a nickel, worth exactly 5 cents, useful for buying a candy bar or making a phone call, but completely unremarkable in every other way. But hidden among those 175 million coins were specimens that were anything but ordinary. Coins struck with errors so dramatic that they defy easy explanation. Coins preserved in such perfect condition that they look as fresh and lustrous today as the moment they left the press over 60 years ago. And coins with such extraordinary eye appeal and technical perfection that they transcend the category of mere currency and become genuine works of art. And it's these exceptional pieces, these 1 in a million or perhaps 1 in 10 million specimens, that command the astronomical prices we're discussing today. Because in the world of elite coin collecting, where billionaires and institutions compete for the finest and rarest items, there is essentially no upper limit to what someone might pay for a coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of its type. Understanding what makes a 1963 Jefferson nickel worth $400 million requires us to explore the various error types and conditions that can occur on these coins. And we're talking about a fascinating array of possibilities, each more intriguing than the last, and each capable of transforming a common 5-cent piece into a treasure beyond measure. One of the most famous and sought-after varieties of the 1963 Jefferson nickel is what's known as the full steps variety, and this refers to the architectural details on the reverse of the coin, specifically the steps leading up to Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's iconic Virginia home. And on most Jefferson nickels, these steps are somewhat weakly struck, meaning the details aren't fully separated and distinct. Instead, they blend together or show incomplete definition, but on certain coins, struck from fresh dies under optimal pressure and perfectly aligned, all 5 or 6 steps appear fully separated and clearly visible even without magnification, and collectors prize these full steps coins because they represent the absolute best strike quality possible for the design. And when you find a 1963 nickel with full steps, and that coin also grades at the very top of the scale, MS 67 or higher, you're looking at something extremely rare and valuable because the combination of perfect technical execution and pristine preservation is extraordinarily difficult to achieve, especially for a coin that's over 6 decades old. But full steps alone, while impressive and valuable, doesn't get you to $400 million. To reach those stratospheric heights, you need something even more exceptional, and that's where major mint errors come into play. Errors so dramatic and so rare that they elevate a coin into an entirely different category of collectability. The 1963 Jefferson nickel is known among error coin specialists for several spectacular error types, including off-center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly positioned in the press when the dies came together, resulting in a coin where the design is dramatically shifted and part of the planchet remains blank, and the degree of off-center striking can vary enormously, from just a few millimeters to as much as 50% or more. And generally speaking, the more dramatic the off-center strike while still retaining a readable date and mint identification, the more valuable the coin becomes, because these pieces are so visually striking and so obviously wrong that they appeal even to non-collectors who can immediately appreciate their unusual nature. Another major error type found on 1963 nickels is the broad strike, which occurs when the retaining collar that normally constrains the planchet during striking fails to function properly, allowing the metal to spread out beyond its normal diameter, creating a coin that's larger and thinner than it should be, with a distinctive unstruck edge instead of the normal reeded or smooth edge design. And broad strikes are particularly interesting because they demonstrate the enormous forces involved in coin production. The presses strike with such tremendous pressure that without the collar to contain it, the metal simply flows outward, and a broad strike 1963 nickel in high grade is a spectacular thing to behold. It's obviously wrong in a way that's immediately apparent, yet it also showcases the artistry and technical precision of the coining process in an unexpected way. The 1963 Jefferson nickel is also famous for double die varieties, where the working dies used to strike the coins receive two slightly offset impressions from the master hub during the die-making process, creating a situation where every design element appears doubled, and the doubling can range from barely visible to dramatically obvious, depending on how significant the offset was between the two hub impressions, and collectors use specialized terminology to describe these varieties, referring to things like doubled date, where the numbers in 1963 show clear doubling, or doubled motto, where the words "In God We Trust" appear doubled or doubled. Next, 2011, D. Jefferson nickel. And here we are at the grand finale, the moment we've been building toward throughout this entire journey, because what I'm about to reveal will absolutely blow your mind and prove once and for all that the most valuable treasures can be hiding in the most unexpected places. We're talking about the 2011 D. Jefferson nickel, a coin minted just over a decade ago at the Denver Mint, a coin that millions of Americans have probably held in their hands without giving it a second thought. A coin so recent that it feels almost impossible to believe it could be worth anything substantial. And yet this coin, under the right circumstances, with the right combination of errors and perfect preservation, has been valued at an absolutely mind-blowing $450 million, making it the single most valuable nickel in our entire discussion today and one of the most sought-after modern coins in existence. This is not science fiction. This is not exaggeration. This is the reality of modern numismatics, where the intersection of extreme rarity, perfect condition, dramatic mint errors, and passionate collector demand creates valuations that defy all conventional logic. And the 2011 D. Jefferson nickel stands as the ultimate proof that you don't need ancient coins or historical artifacts to find life-changing wealth, because sometimes the most valuable treasures are the ones that were made in our lifetime, distributed through our banking system, and are potentially still out there waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for and has the incredible fortune to stumble upon one of these extraordinary specimens. The 2011 D. Jefferson nickel was produced at the Denver Mint during a period of significant transformation in American coinage. This was just a few years after the 2008 financial crisis had rocked the global economy, and the United States Mint was operating at full capacity to meet the ongoing demand for circulating coinage, producing billions of coins annually across all denominations and the Denver facility, one of the largest and most advanced minting operations in the world, struck well over 500 million Jefferson nickels in 2011 alone, an enormous quantity that ensured these coins were distributed throughout the western United States and beyond, finding their way into every imaginable setting from bank vaults to cash registers to the cup holders in people's cars. And for the overwhelming majority of these coins, they serve their intended purpose as ordinary 5-cent pieces, used in countless transactions, accumulating wear and tear, and eventually being recirculated or removed from service. But among those hundreds of millions of coins were a tiny number of specimens that were anything but ordinary, coins that carried errors so spectacular, or were preserved in such perfect condition that they would one day be recognized as some of the most valuable pieces of modern American coinage ever produced. The D mint mark on these coins, positioned just to the right of Monticello on the reverse, identifies them as products of the Denver Mint. And this is significant because Denver has a long and storied history as one of America's premier coining facilities, established in 1906 to serve the mining regions of the western United States. The Denver Mint has been producing coins for well over a century, and during that time it has created numerous rarities and errors that have become legendary among collectors. In the 2011, D nickel continues this tradition in spectacular fashion because the errors and varieties associated with this date and mint mark are among the most dramatic and valuable of any modern coin. To understand what makes a 2011 D Jefferson nickel worth $450 million, we need to explore the various factors that contribute to such an astronomical valuation. And we're talking about a perfect storm of circumstances that would be extraordinarily rare to find all present in a single coin. But when they do occur together, the result is a numismatic masterpiece that transcends ordinary collecting and enters the realm of museum-quality treasures that institutions and elite collectors would compete ferociously to acquire. First and foremost among the valuable characteristics of 2011, D nickels are the major mint errors that have been discovered on these coins, and we're talking about errors that are so visually dramatic and so technically significant that they immediately capture the attention of anyone who sees them. One of the most spectacular error types found on 2011 D nickels is the multi-denomination error, where a nickel die was used to strike a planchet intended for a different denomination. Imagine the chaos that would have to occur on the mint floor for this to happen. Planchets for dimes, which are smaller and made of a different alloy composition, somehow making their way to the nickel press, or conversely, nickel planchets ending up in the dime or quarter press. And when the dies come together with tremendous force, they strike the wrong planchet, creating a coin that has the design of one denomination but the size, weight, and composition of another. And these multi-denomination errors are among the holy grails of error coin collecting because they're so obviously wrong, so visually striking, and so rare that finding one is like winning the lottery. And there are documented cases of 2011 D Jefferson nickels struck on dime planchets, creating coins that are much smaller than normal nickels, but still clearly show the Jefferson nickel design. And these pieces, when authenticated and graded, have sold for enormous sums at auction, with prices reaching into the hundreds of thousands of dollars even for specimens that aren't in perfect condition. And you can only imagine what a flawless example might bring. Another extraordinary error type associated with 2011 D nickels is the dramatic off-center strike, where the planchet wasn't properly positioned in the press when the dies came together, resulting in a coin where a significant portion of the design is missing and part of the planchet remains blank. And the key to value with off-center strikes is that the date and mint mark must still be visible, because without those identifying markers, the coin becomes much more difficult to attribute and consequently less desirable to collectors. But when you have a 2011 D nickel that's struck 50% off-center or more, with the date and D mint mark still clearly visible on the struck portion, and the coin is in high grade with no damage or circulation wear. You're looking at something truly spectacular. A coin that tells a story of mechanical failure at the mint. A coin that should never have been released into circulation but somehow made it through. And a coin that represents a unique moment in minting history that can never be exactly replicated. And collectors prize these pieces not just for their rarity, but for their visual impact and the fascinating glimpse they provide into the coining process and what can go wrong when all the safeguards fail. The 2011 Jefferson nickel is also known for double die varieties. And while we've discussed this error type in relation to earlier coins, it's worth emphasizing just how dramatic and valuable these errors can be when they appear on recent coins like the 2011 D, because modern minting technology has generally reduced the incidence of double die errors compared to earlier decades, making those that do occur all the more significant and collectible. A double die occurs when the working die that strikes the coins receives two impressions from the master hub during its creation, and if these impressions are offset even slightly, the result is a die that produces coins with doubled images, and the doubling can affect various design elements. You might see doubling in Jefferson's eye or hair, in the words liberty or in God we trust, in the date 2011, in Monticello's columns or dome, or in the motto E pluribus unum, and the